Hello, one and all, and welcome to the Super Show podcast, episode number 232. And of two white guys who know absolutely nothing about anime or manga, fumbling their way through a story about one of the major players in that space. Sounds like your idea of fun, then boy, do I have the podcast for you. It's this one, it's the one you're already listening to. Welcome. Hi, Jonesy, how's it going?
I have you know, I am an expert on anime and manga. So, egg is on your face. I watched the entirety of Attack on Titan, so I know everything there is to know.
I can vouch for that fact. Josie has seen all of Attack on Titan, but you
and nothing
have
else.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let me do the real litmus test. For the folks at home, give us the real pronunciations, the authentic pronunciations for anime and manga.
No, I'm not going to do it. I don't know.
Folks, I know if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, you can't see me making a very small gap between my thumb and finger, but that's how close we were to get Jonesy to be outright racist on a podcast. I know we've only got 3 episodes left of this bad boy, but I genuinely think we can reach that goal. That's our stretch goal for the podcast.
I don't buy it when it comes to accents. Like, accents.
You don't think it's racially insensitive?
No, I don't. I love doing accents, as you well know.
Yeah,
I can't help it, and if it's a term, it's a way to be endearing. I think I have no. If you're being mean, then don't do it. But I think accents are fair play.
As with all things, intent has to maybe enter the conversation at some point. I also, as I always used to say to you and Chris back in the day, whenever you caught me doing accents, maybe when we were doing a voiceover, I would make the argument that if you're as good at accents as I am, then if anything, it's a compliment.
I was asked to do an accent. Here's an admission for a relatively big YouTube channel.
Yeah.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
I was requested to do it.
A video that could have been seen by millions of people.
Was seen by millions of people, and I didn't even think anything of it. I think I don't know why I was asked. I think it's just because no one else was available, and they were like, "Oh, can you do this video?" And I was like, "Sure." And then did a voice. I didn't really know what the guy's. I knew what he sounded like, but I wasn't 100%. So I just kind of winged it, and didn't think much of it. No bad intent. It was a genuine sort of like comedic effort, because that's what the channel was. It was like it had a bit of comedy, it had a bit of fun to it. It wasn't supposed to be straight. And then years after the fact, someone mentioned it and said that might have been pretty racist, and I was like, I don't think so. And I checked on the channel, and a lot of the comments were that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I genuinely was. So I'm going back like at least, I don't even know, like probably like maybe like 12 years or something like that. But genuinely was surprised at that was what people's reaction was. And I'm glad it no longer exists, because I wouldn't want to have to explain to people that maybe I was just too stupid to realize that I should have questioned that. Maybe. Yes. I don't know.
No, of all of our former exploits that have been wiped off the face of the internet, that is perhaps something that we're not going to miss. Although, you can rest easy knowing that you're not going to take the crown for the most racially insensitive video or accent that went up on that channel. There's one, I think it might have been, I don't know if it was the one that started the channel, but one that was very early on.
I know, yeah. I can't remember what it was, but
I can say that it was well, actually, technically not a white guy, but not a person that's from East Asia doing a very regrettable Kim Jong-un impression was what that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
That's what it gets. I think
questionable, maybe.
I think that's one thing that makes it that can confuse things. Is it London, where we work, is a very metropolitan city, lots of different people from different places. So you know so many people from other places. You don't think anything of it at the time. Like, you're just like, oh yeah, cool, like whatever. And then, but other people on the internet, I suppose, it's not like that. So they're like, this was odd. Maybe this was not okay. And you're like, oh damn, in my office of people who are from a very diverse group of people from different places, I think it seemed okay at the time, and it probably wasn't.
I don't know if I'm fully going to get behind the idea that it seemed okay at the time. I think there were some raised eyebrows at the time, but we didn't really have. I don't know. To be fair, none of the people who were raising eyebrows were also raising their voices. They were just sitting at the back of the room raising eyebrows. So that's on that. No one spoke up, I guess, is the situation.
Right. But we learn as we grow, and
we learn as we grow.
Nowadays we would say, hold on a minute. I don't think this is probably a great idea.
Yeah, so something seems amiss about this. Let me set all of these videos to private and pretend this never happened, which is probably what we're going to do with the Super Show podcast after we've hit episode 234 and pack this whole thing up.
How dare you?
That's a joke. Don't worry. The podcast is not going to go private. But yes, we are in... What did we establish last week or the week before? The anti-penultimate episode of the podcast?
Yes. Yeah. Anti-penultimate. Because then it was you just add anti to every one before that, right? So this is the anti-penultimate because next week's penultimate and then the ultimate, which is weird to me because obviously I thought the ultimate was the best, but ultimate was obviously the last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose that maybe the meaning's interchangeable. I'm not really sure. I never necessarily use the word ultimate and expect people to interpret it as me saying like the last in the sequence. But I guess, yeah, it's one of those words. It's flexible. But that also reminds me that we do need to put our finger out a little bit and figure out exactly what the last two episodes of the podcast are going to look like. Because if anyone was hoping that, that the home stretch we'd spice things up a little bit and maybe for the anti-penultimate episode we'd do something a little bit different or sprinkle a little bit of glitter on top of this show, you're going to be hugely disappointed because it is still just me and Jonesy scraping the bottom of the news barrel and telling you about what we found. Which, hey, maybe there's some comfort in that, Jonesy, right? Like, it's like a nice, cozy fight. It's the thing you know. It's the thing some of you have been listening to at least for many, many years now. So why rock the boat?
Absolutely.
All right. As a reminder, in case you'd forgotten, God, boy, am I looking forward to never having to say all of this ever again for the rest of my life. You can find the YouTube... fucking hell. You can find the Super Show... We're on YouTube, we're on Twitter. The handle for both those is that Super Show Pod. But if you want to listen to the audio version of this podcast, you can, of course, do so on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts. I'm going to ask that if you do go over there and decide to leave a review, you make it a 5-star review, although we are fast approaching a date at from which I will no longer care. And then that's not an excuse to go and vote it 1 star. Like, it'd be nice to be able to look back on it one day and go, oh, look at that. That's a 5-star podcast me and the boys used to do. But, it's just a suggestion, not something you have to act on. And if you don't like any of that stuff, if that sounds a little bit too digital, a little bit too new wave for you, then of course you can still catch us for the time being for the next 3 weeks on Paisley Radio. The link for that, paisleyradio.com, Thursdays at 10 p.m. The person who is responsible for putting us on digital radio does know that the show is coming to an end. But I wonder if he's had to. We never even stopped to ask him if he's had to find a replacement or fill our slot.
He's in chat right now, so I would,
Okay.
And he will, Witch was in there a couple weeks ago as well. I think when we announced it. So otherwise, we would have, I think, had to obviously drop him a line. But it was a relatively, we decided, and then it was pretty quick to when we announced it. It wasn't like there was a big amount of time. We didn't really know much before we sort of announced it. I mean, obviously we knew a little bit before. That would have been weird if one of us just said, "We're not doing this anymore," and the other's like, "Ah!" But that's
great prank.
Yeah, hilarious.
Yeah.
So he knows. Well, yeah. So he knows. He knows. I'm sure there'll be something hip hop and happening to replace us.
I should hope so. Thursdays at 10 p.m., aka prime time. And of course, if anyone wanted to use the Super Show name or wanted to use the Super Show branding or continue on the podcast, first of all, you don't have our blessing or our permission, but we might be willing to entertain an offer. All you need to do is, and I've learnt this in the past week, Jonesy, send us a letter of intent. Apparently that's the way things work. And if you send us a letter of intent, we apparently have to go to the press and confirm that you send us a letter of intent and that you're after us and all our goodies. If you wanted to take the most long-winded and expensive route to getting that Patreon exclusive content, then you could send us a letter of intent, just like Sony did, Jonesy, in this past week to Kadokawa Corporation, that is. Have you heard of them?
Yeah, love them. Love their stuff. I've been listening to them from the early days before they were famous and popular. So, can I say?
Yeah, Jonesy actually bought Kadokawa Corporation's first album. Not many people know that. Back when Kadokawa Corporation was still primarily just a pirate radio band more than anything, Jonesy was tuning in from his bedroom, all the pirate airwaves. He had it on vinyl. It's probably worth a fortune nowadays. No, we jest. Kadokawa, for those of you who haven't heard of the company, whilst it's not necessarily the biggest claim to fame that they've got, outside of the realms of this podcast, for the purposes of this podcast, it's worth noting that Kadokawa are the parent company of FromSoftware, the noted developers of such hits as Elden Ring and the Dark Souls trilogy and Bloodborne, and many, many more hits. Kadokawa own about, I think, just shy of 70% of From Software. And as a reminder for anyone that missed when it happened however many years ago, Sony actually already own about 15% of From Software. So if we hone in on just the gaming angle for a second, Jonesy, this would result in Sony Interactive Entertainment, I presume, owning about 85%, effectively owning about 85% of From Software, which would give them a significant degree of control. But it's very hard to say for sure what they might do with that control and what the repercussions might be when it comes to things like exclusivity or remasters of titles like Bloodborne. If you were a Sony and you had a studio now in your hands that could make titles like Elden Ring that could be absolutely massive cross-platform smash hits, what would you do with them?
It's an interesting one. I wonder what would I do with them. I don't think I would change much. They're very popular at the moment. I think having cross-platform games, I think, is the way to go. I wonder if part of it is almost just a bit of fear from Sony's side because of how many studios Xbox have bought up over the years, and the fact that they're probably thinking, what's their next move? They could do this, da da da. And what you don't want to do is end up with Xbox having all of the control. But it doesn't seem that crazy to buy the parent company for From Software. I mean, they're with all the developers who are doing not badly, but who have made questionable decisions and have questionable hits, not even hits these days. Maybe they're just hoping that they can get their hands on a studio which can still pump out the big guns, the big names.
Right. Like consistently develop critically acclaimed and commercially successful games. But then you end up in a weird situation where, if you are a Herman Holst and I don't know, let's jump forward however many years and however many hoops we need to jump through, and From Software, let's say, become like a PlayStation studio, and so all of a sudden anything they develop could theoretically be exclusive, and it would be first party software and all of that. You'd be in a weird situation in how much you'd intervene. Because we all love the idea of an acquisition going through and the parent company or the buying company saying, we love what you do, we're buying you because we love what you do, we love your culture, we love the products we don't want to touch a thing, we don't want to meddle in anything, we don't want to mess with your formula. You're doing what you do better than what we do. And in 5 years' time, that, contract, that verbal contract has been completely ripped apart and that studio is completely different, unrecognizable. Sony would have to tread really carefully to not immediately start undoing the work that From Software has done independently over the past, 10 plus years now.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I don't know. I don't know enough with business about how much you buy the parent company. Right, okay, how much control does that give you on a day-to-day basis? You've got to assume, like you said, if they've got a big stake in From Software, does that mean they can on a day-to-day tell them what they're going to do and what to change, or does it mean that they can shift and move things around, people inside of that inside of From Software to make a difference? I don't know enough about how much control they'd have, but you've got to imagine that they're not buying it because they don't have plans. And I think the way that they will start off these things is by saying, we're not going to change anything, we just like you,
right? Yeah.
But as you said, there's going to be down the line, it will take, all it will take is, and this seems to sort of play out in a few things we've seen in the last few years, all it will take is a couple of things to maybe go ways that people weren't expecting for Sony to say, we're going to step in for this, we're going to step in for that, we're going to change the way this works, we're going to change the way that works. And then you've got a very different entity in From Software. I'm listening to Jason Schreier's book about Blizzard at the moment, and there's that happens multiple times to Blizzard, where they had situations where the board, all the top people were like, we're gonna say to the parent company that if they do this, we're gonna quit, and then the board are like, we've considered what you've said and we've accepted your resignations. Goodbye, and they're gone. And like half of the board are just or more have just gone, and then loads of the staff leave and loads of redundancies. And it's that old saying about like how much of like. Is it the boat? It's a boat, isn't it? Like how many aspects of a boat can you change before it's a different boat?
Oh right,
or the mop.
I forget whose boat it is. Is it like Theseus's boat? Or
something.
It's
like
one
that.
of those dudes.
Yeah, and
I'll look up whose boat it is.
So how much of From Software over the years can you change before it's not From Software anymore? And that's what I kind of worry about with anything like this. Is if they just start to change a little bits here and there. Is 10 years, 15 years down the line, it's a different company, even though it's the same name on it. I don't. Yeah, I think it's far too early to tell. What do you think is their plan, or do they have plans?
I don't know if they've got a huge plan. Like I don't think there's probably some PowerPoint tucked away somewhere on someone's desktop of like, here's what we could theoretically do with From Software. But I think that's more just about how you like. If they've had any conversations or discussions thus far, it's more about how they incorporate From Software into their family of studios, and how potentially they make From Software a PlayStation studio, and how they leverage the IP that From Software already has. And like again, you look at what's happening with other studios and IP within the PlayStation Studios family. Like you look at what's happening with something with Guerrilla, where broadly speaking, we're given the impression that Guerrilla have kind of been allowed to keep doing what they want, and they've been allowed to focus on. Well, we hope at least they've been allowed to focus on Horizon because that's what they want to do, not what they're being forced to do. And then they're probably now somewhere away, toiling away on the third Horizon game and whatever that Horizon multiplayer thing ends up being. And in the meantime, Sony, like broader than that, are like remastering the Horizon Zero Dawn, and they're doing a deal to make a Lego Horizon, and until it sort of collapsed in on itself. In the summer, because of allegations made against the showrunner, there was a Horizon TV show in the works at Netflix that was actually, I think, a lot closer to being a thing than people realized. Again, like if there hadn't been allegations made against the showrunner, it would probably be, I think, in production by now. Now, you could make the argument that because things like a Horizon Zero Dawn remastered are deemed to be so unnecessary by the wider public, that Sony are actually doing more harm than good to Guerrilla's brands and Guerrilla's IP by expanding on them in ways that people don't care about. But I think those are probably the conversations that are happening. Not how can we get in FromSoft's way and tell them what to make next and force them, hey, you have to make an Elden Ring 2 and it has to be out within the next 2 years, the way that a Bobby Kotick might have if he were involved in a From Software acquisition, just to bring it back around to what you're listening to at the moment. I think it's more like, how do we make sure From Software continue to have the runway to make exactly what they want to make and when they want to make it and the time they want to make it, and in the meantime, we can finally get under whatever annoying piece of paperwork that was standing between us and a Bloodborne remake out of the way, ship that off to Bluepoint or Nix's or whatever, and have that, make that something that's now feasible, because everything's in place for it, but we're not necessarily distracting FromSoft by going down that road. And then maybe add to that, maybe we get a Dark Souls anime on an animated Dark Souls show on Netflix in 2 years' time, and then a live action Sekiro movie in 4 years, and so on and so forth. That's maybe what I don't think that's actually what happens, for the record, but yeah. I could see those being some of the plates that people are beginning to spin should something like this happen.
Yeah, it's also a weird one because I think a lot of these acquisitions seem to happen when the companies are riding particularly high.
Right.
And if you think like Elden Ring, the DLC just dropped, it's doing phenomenally well. Like everyone's talking about it. And it makes sense. Like Sony, we're gonna buy the companies that control FromSoft, but then what happens if actually FromSoft start to go a little stale in the next few years, and suddenly they've spent a hell of a lot of money on something which is now not worth as much as it was when you bought it. That does seem to happen semi-regularly, so I'm sure they'll be a bit wary about that. I should say in chat, Kasim said it's the ship of Theseus which is what I think you said.
It's
did you
the
say
ship of
Theseus?
I did. I think I did say Theseus. But every time I say Theseus, I'm like, hang on. Theseus is the guy from Theseus and the Minotaur. It can't be named after him. That's a guy who's famous for going into a labyrinth and fighting a half man, half.
Is that Theseus who fought the Minotaur?
I don't know if it's the same Theseus, but I'm pretty sure that dude was called Theseus. Again,
my memory fails me.
Yeah, I think Theseus did a lot of things, but I'm pretty sure
he's busy.
Killing a Minotaur was one. That's the thing. These characters of Greek legend and Greek mythology tended to get up to a lot of stuff. Looping back around though to the joke I made at the top of the podcast, Jonesy, I think one thing that might potentially soften the blow for Sony should something somehow go awry with From Software is that the longer you look at this whole situation and this potential acquisition, the less it looks like Sony might actually be doing this just to get their hands on From Software. Like, if anything, getting their hands on From Software might be a lucky accident, because as we mentioned, Kadokawa Corporation are From Software's parent company, but it is one of a number of things that they do. Many of the other pieces of the puzzle may, of course, be of interest to Sony in the long run. To get a couple of them out the way, Kadokawa also owns Dwango, which is the name of a company. Again, it's not someone with a lisp telling you their favorite Quentin Tarantino film. It's a Japanese telecoms and media company, and that owns developer Spike Chunsoft, who most recently were responsible for Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. A game that you have to say that way because the exclamation mark comes after the word sparking, not the word zero.
Right.
Get it right, folks. But then, of course, as we alluded to, there's all the kind of crazy anime and manga stuff that Kadokawa are involved with. I have it on good authority, Jonesy, that Kadokawa holds the rights to more than 100,000 what are being described as anime-friendly fantasy and sci-fi novels and comics, amongst all the and. Again, apparently one of the key elements here, I'm reading this and kind of like podcastizing it as I go, so I apologize if this is a little bit of a hack job. But from what I understand, when you look at Kadokawa's peers in the anime and manga industries, we've got one that you might recognize, Kodansha Limited, who are apparently the Attack on Titan people, and the Shueisha Incorporated, who are like One Piece and Dragon Ball.
Oh, okay.
Those companies are all private and have been dismissing takeover bids without a second thought for a long, long time. Kadokawa, on the other hand, are a publicly traded company and therefore have a more diverse group of owners and shareholders that they need to consider when it comes to a parent company coming in and potentially trying to get a hold of that stuff. And then, there's again, from the article I'm reading, there's a lot of chatter about the rate at which Japan's anime industry is growing. It has doubled in size in the last decade, reaching $19.5 billion by 2022. And then, of course, there's some of the moves that Sony themselves have already made in anime. They've got an anime planning subsidiary called Aniplex, and they apparently scored a huge win by turning the Shueisha-owned Demon Slayer into an anime series, and later some record-setting movies, none of which I've seen. I apologize, anime fans. And of course, we have Crunchyroll, which is a streaming service and anime distributor over in the US. Sony already bought them in 2021 for $1.2 billion, and they obviously hold a massively leading position in distributing Japanese anime internationally. Did you ever, at any point, watch any of your Attack on Titan through Crunchyroll?
No, I did. Of course,
well,
you have to watch it on Crunchyroll. I watched the final, Attack on Titan was like years, and years between like the last few seasons. It was painful. And the place to get it was Crunchyroll.
There you go. So I mean, that is illustrative of the fact that Sony are already in pretty deep when it comes to their ability to create and distribute anime, certainly to Western markets, and having access to a company that have a pretty solid foothold in Japanese markets, but then also, as we mentioned, have a significant, a substantial stock of fantasy, sci-fi, and other comics that they hold the rights to, that then can be leveraged for all kinds of other purposes. It definitely suggests that there's a lot more to this acquisition than just From Software. Almost to the point where, like, again, From Software might be the cherry on top. Like, there might be people looking at this and saying, hey, we really want Kadokawa. oh, and by the way, you guys over in the gaming sector, we'd throw you this bone as well. And they're going, well, yeah, sign us up.
Yeah, imagine that. Nice little. Oh, I've got a nice little bonus for you. What's that? You're going to get from software. Sorry, what?
Yeah, Herman Hulse gets cool. Like, have you heard of this company they're called From Software? I think it's called. Would you like them in PlayStation Studios? We're probably going to acquire their parent company. Of course, that wouldn't be the case. In fact, the article I'm reading suggests that one investor had joked that Miyazaki alone, obviously noted director of many of From Software's most celebrated games, can be worth at least a third of Kadokawa's market value, simply because of how capable he is at producing massive hits one after the other, each of which seems to be able to supersede the successes of the last one, which is quite remarkable. Obviously, that was said in jest, but it's probably not a million miles from the truth either. When you've got a hit maker like that, worth hanging on to. That's worth something. Excuse me.
It is kind of mad as well when you think about a lot of these acquisitions. Like you are, as like you were saying, a lot of it is actually down to the people behind the scenes and the individuals who are doing a lot of the stuff. But actually, you could find that you go and buy one of these companies or the parent company, or whatever, and then not long after, the people who you were like, oh, we really want these people, they're like, I think I'm out. And then you're like, no, stay. And they're like, nah, I've gone.
That's why you got to get them on deals. You got to put contracts under their nose, like, if this acquisition goes through, you can't leave within 5 years. And then, funnily enough, 5 years later on the dot, they're like, "See ya,
bye.
Thanks for the cheese. I'm out of here." Yeah, fascinating situation. It's gonna be really interesting to see what happens. Unfortunately, like so many of these acquisition tales, it's probably going to play out over a number of probably years, more so than months, certainly until we know actually what's going to happen on the From Software front and what the future looks like for any of the players involved. But an interesting little story to kick off a horribly uninteresting podcast. But we do it for you. And when I say you, I don't just mean you out there watching or listening wherever you are around the world. I also mean the fine folks that have made it, possible, that have laid the groundwork for us to keep the Super Show going for as long as we have. And those are the individuals that have supported us on Patreon. The link that, again, I'll say now, but we should probably stop saying soon because I don't know if we've even 100% decided what's going to happen. But patreon.com/Super Show. Do you know what I'll do for the sake of ease? I'll just talk about it in the past tense. Patreon.com/Super Show is the place that previously a number of very generous, very considerate folks have gone over and helped support this podcast and help it keep it going for over 200 episodes. Again, I don't even know. I'm not going to do the sales pitch. If you're listening to this, you probably already know everything that's over there. If you did want to get in, in these last 2 weeks to check out any of the Patreon exclusive content, then by all means go and do so. But at the same time, if you did feel like sitting pretty for a handful of weeks, we're probably going to come up with some kind of a solution to make as much of that available for as many people as we possibly can going forward, without there being any money involved, of course.
Yeah.
And so instead, we're simply just going to take a moment to thank the people that have continued to support us and seen us get this far. There are some names on screen right now, so a big shout out to each and every one of you. And I'd also like to say a personal thank you to Aaron Cameron, Athletic Gravy, Brimstone, I Snort Rock Salt, Jesper Camdal Nielsen, Pastors Guild, Xander GTI, and then of course we have the big dogs, Brett Z, aka Shellshock, Geometric Potter, Hacksaw Book Read, Manuel Guerrero, and Peaswad. Big shout outs to each and every one of you. All right, Mr. Jones. What? That's a big sigh.
It's like it's funny when we do that sort of stuff. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Probably only do that twice more ever. Sad times.
Yeah, probably.
As JB said, we'll figure something out with the Patreon. I think what we'll probably do is I don't know. I was looking at the other day. I think the easiest thing to do is to like make all the levels, because if I just turn them all off, I think it'll break. So I might just make them like 10p or something silly. So that
just the lowest amount.
Yeah, whatever the lowest amount you can actually do is, or something. But I don't know. I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out before December as well, because otherwise I don't know what the actual. I think it's the 1st of December, so obviously don't want people to be charged 1st of December. So.
Yeah, that's the main thing. We got to make sure that the taps turned off at the time at which people will automatically get billed, because that'll be awkward if we take a month.
But I think I think I can pause it. So I'll do that tomorrow. I'll pause it and then I can tweak around, tweak the levels, whatever. So if you did want to stay on there, it'll be like 10p or something, just if you want to get access to stuff. And then we'll figure out anyway what we're going to do with that content. It might just be a case that we upload it to the YouTube channel, so it's available. But if I say that, I'm like,
or we can just we could make it all we could make it all unlisted, but put it all in one playlist and give people the link to that playlist.
That's a good idea.
So it's not private, it's all accessible, but it was also not there front and center on the YouTube channel. So you don't have people, for posterity's sake, scrolling through in a few years' time being like, why are there these random 45-minute long episodes of the podcast where they're saying some really rogue shit?
That's a good way to do that. I think that's a good idea. We could post it on the Discord so people can still access that list, and then they can, if they want to, all those different links. Cool.
Sounds good. All right, Jonesy. Look, it's one of the realities of being at the end of the year or the start of a new year. Whether you like it or not, they're here to stay. Awards shows. And we were here, of course, this time last week reacting to the news of the nominations for Jeff Keighley's Game Awards. We broke down some of the categories, what we thought of the nominations. We even gave some predictions for what we thought might win in some of those categories. I thought maybe this week it'd be slightly interesting to kind of do the opposite and instead look at an award show that in the last week has already given out some awards. And we can break down the who's, the when, the where's, the whys, and what we think about the Golden Joystick Awards 2024. And one of the reasons I kind of thought this was interesting is I don't think the winners here will have that much of a bearing on the Game Awards necessarily, because the Golden Joystick Awards, for anyone that didn't already know, are largely voted for by the fans. In fact, nearly all of the awards we're going to talk about were voted on by the fans. There were only 4 awards that we'll get to at the end that were decided by a panel of critics and creators. So again, it is kind of interesting to see what the differences are between entirely fan-voted awards and entirely critic and creator-chosen awards. But at the same time, when you look at some of the winners and what did well and what didn't do so well, it's actually unsurprising, some of the directions it's gone. Which leads us, Jonesy, actually to the first category, which the Golden Joysticks call the Ultimate Game of the Year. I don't know why they need the word ultimate. It brings me back to that conversation we had earlier, where maybe it's not the best game of the year, but the last game of the year.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Now that I know that ultimate means last, it's a bit weird. Maybe it's because you don't play anything else after you've played it because it's so good.
So in 2023, did they do the penultimate game of the year?
And before that, the anti-penultimate. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. I was going to... So, rather than going you through all the individual nominees and boring anyone with a long list of games, I will say there wasn't too much surprising in the nominees, outside of maybe, I think some might suggest that Dragon Age the Veilguard was slightly lucky to get on there. And another game that didn't come up very much in the Game Awards, but did come up a little bit more in the Golden Joysticks, was Satisfactory, which... Right. I can only presume entered 1.0 this year, and maybe that's why it's a little bit better presented. But the winner, Jonesy, perhaps unsurprisingly, with fan voting at the helm, is Black Myth Wukong, a game that neither of us have played. But from what I can tell, there are a lot of very passionate Black Myth Wukong fans online at the moment.
I want to be one. I've wanted to play Black Myth Wukong for years, and the only reason I haven't played it is because I'm trying to be good. And I've spent a lot of money recently, and I'm trying to not spend any more money. So it's. Do you know what? It's on my Christmas list. That's what I've resorted to, because I really want to play Black Myth Wukong. I'm surprised this one voted on by fans, because as far as I understood, it's very well received, but wasn't some people saying it wasn't up there to be a Game of the Year contender, despite the fact that it had a lot going for it. But no, so I'm very pleased that has won Game of the Year. I'm now looking forward to playing it even more than I was for the last 5 years or whatever it's been, 4 years, 3 years.
There you go. I think, and this is largely based on Twitter or X, which is basically the only social media platform where I ever really see any gaming chatter. I think there's been a mixture of reactions where I think a lot of the critics and people of that nature, maybe even some creators, were like, this is solid. This is a 7 or 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
And then there was, I don't know how to phrase this, perhaps a certain subsection of gaming Twitter who are like, no, this is amazing, this is the game of the year, and if you don't think it is, you're well, and then they proceed to call you some rather nasty words.
Yeah, not surprisingly, that's often the way.
Put it this way, Jonesy. If you went on Twitter right now and said, I don't think Black Myth Wukong should have won the Ultimate Game of the Year at the Golden Joystick Awards 2024, the top response would probably be a sarcastic response saying, oh, who did you think should have won? Dragon Age the Veil Gay? I'm guessing that's what they call it.
Probably.
It's one of those kind of crowds. Put it this way, there's a lot of people who probably think that if Black Myth Wukong didn't deserve to win, they probably would have voted for Stellar Blade.
Another good game. Like, this is what's a bit odd to me about this year, I think, and we talked about this a little bit with the Game Awards and the games that have been nominated. There's a lot of good games. I don't find it particularly easy to pick like the best.
Me neither.
It is difficult. Like, there are games that I've enjoyed this year and I thought are very good, but nothing has jumped out of me and has made me say, oh, that my game of the year, easy.
100%.
But I think that leaves it open to be a much tighter race, usually in these kinds of things when people are voting. So I would love to know the actual number of votes that each game got in this category, because I'd be interested to see how close some of the top games were. I can't imagine there was much in it.
No, probably not. Probably not. And I think there'll be even less in it when it comes to the Game Awards and the kind of the jury that are working towards those decisions. If we look elsewhere at the Golden Joystick Awards, I'll be honest, Jonesy, there's not much that I consider hugely surprising or much of a shock. Both Helldivers 2 and Astrobot kind of did pretty well when it came to slightly more niche categories. Well, I say Astrobot, ASOBI won Studio of the Year. Helldivers 2 clearly still striking more of a chord with fans online than it perhaps did with the jury involved in the Game Awards. It won Console Game of the Year, and it also won Best Multiplayer Game. Astrobot won Best Audio Design, so a pretty solid haul there for PlayStation, who would probably also take some pride in the fact that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth won Best Storytelling. And again, like the one award that is present in both shows and decides itself in both shows, the most wanted game. I think we described the 5 nominees for the Game Awards version of this as Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, in that like it's really one nomination and the rest. The Golden Joystick's nominated like 20 games for Most Wanted Game, and nothing other than GTA 6 was ever going to win. Although it's kind of cool seeing 20. Like, sometimes you forget what's meant to be coming out next year, and it's kind of cool seeing a list where you're reminded that, like, oh yeah, hopefully we do get all of Death Stranding 2 and Doom the Dark Ages and Fable and Ghost of Yotai and Hollow Knight Silksong and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Light No Fire, big one for you, Jonesy. Skate. Like, some massive games could hopefully be coming out next year, assuming there are no delays.
Absolutely, but then, as you've said, like, I think you probably split around 20% of all the votes among every game in that list, and then give the 80% to Grand Theft Auto 6. Like, it's the way it is. I don't think we should be surprised. I don't think that's anything to feel sad about for all those other games. I think, you know, it's just, it is what it is. If you're releasing a game at the same time as Grand Theft Auto 6 is coming out, then I think you can probably expect that the anticipation for your title is not going to be as high as for that. But that's fine. There's space for everything.
I agree. And I don't think it's surprising, and I also don't think it's disappointing. Like, I think that would get my vote, and it wouldn't even be close. So I can't blame anyone.
What would be second for you out of that list that they've got?
Oh, why do you have to ask that question? I don't know, man. It's because, do you know what's annoying? It's because there are some things there that definitely could be. I just want to know if they're going to be good. Like,
right.
It's such a cop-out answer, but like a good skate game or a good Fable game like could easily sneak in at number 2. but then you've got Doom and Death Stranding 2, and those feel like things that are closer to known quantities to me. And same with Ghost of Yotai, where all Death Stranding 2, Doom, and Ghost of Yotai need to be is rock solid sequels that build on the success of their predecessors, and they'll be smash hits. Then you've got like things that are just a big unknown at the moment, like Light No Fire is still a bit of an unknown. I don't know, not necessarily games that would rank that highly for me in terms of my anticipation levels, but things like Atomfall and Exodus, like I don't know if we know much about them. Things that still seem like vaporware, like Hollow Knight Silksong. Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky. I don't know. It might be Fable.
Yeah. Okay.
Just because, again, the prospect of a legitimately incredible Fable game would mean a lot to me.
Yes, I think that's totally fair. I think for me, do you know what? It's probably going to be Ghost of Yotai out of that whole list. I think.
Yeah.
I think if I was gonna pick one, but like, I'm completely with you. It's a rough list to trying to pick one from. But Grand Theft Auto 6 is easily my number one.
Yeah, it has to be. It has to be. Elsewhere, if we look further down the list, I thought it'd be interesting to kind of pick out some categories where the Golden Joysticks had notably gone in a slightly different direction to the Game Awards, and perhaps even inadvertently addressed some of the criticism the Game Awards had faced, especially with this next category, Best Game Expansion. They just straight up went and did it. Although
I suppose this. Much better idea.
It is a very good idea, but it does also remind me of like the inherent difficulty of creating a new I don't know if they've had the previous game expansion, the best game expansion category in previous Golden Joystick Awards, but like they've come up with 5 here, and I think they're all 5, worthy nominees. But are we truly in an age where there are like 5 really high quality, noteworthy expansions or pieces of DLC? Like so many games run that consistent seasonal live service drip feed model, like because. So to break down what they've got, they've got Shadow of Erdtree, which unsurprisingly won. Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred, that makes sense. Destiny 2 The Final Shape, that was really well received. World of Warcraft The War Within, I don't know much about, but I got to presume that WoW people are mostly happy with that. I certainly didn't hear too much controversy. Excuse me. And then you get down to the Alan Wake 2 Expansion Pass, which again...
it's a bit weird.
It's weird, but that's technically what you have to call it, because that's
3 pieces of DLC. Is that?
It's technically 2.
2.
Yeah. Night Springs and the Lake House. But like that is technically the name for that thing, because that's the thing you have to own to get access to both pieces that are both part of that expansion pass. And then the other thing is God of War Ragnarok Valhalla, which you have to sort of have that kind of like, hang on a second, what moment to remind yourself that came out in December of last year. And so for the sake of, the bracket of time that
is after
Golden
Joysticks.
Much like Indiana Jones will be for a lot of outlets this year. Well, Indiana Jones will have to be considered for next year's awards if people remember, which is usually the difficult part of that conversation. And of course, Valhalla was free. So you, even in just coming up with 6 nominees, it's a little bit like, yeah, okay, you kind of got 6 here, but like, it's no surprise that 6 is the. I don't know. There are other categories that have 6 nominees. So I'm not going to suggest it's like a weird thing, but
it feels like they were maybe stretching a little.
I think a little.
And what happens next year,
quality.
Or the year after, when it's either when they're like, we're not going to. Do you know what? Maybe they just say we're just not going to do it this year. If there's 3 or fewer, and they're like, well, look, we can't just do that. So let's just get rid of it.
Then are you just bringing a category like back and forth year on year, depending on whether or not a really good thing came out, and that just feels weird.
That does feel a bit weird. But like you said, it stops you having the issue that the Game Awards have had by including Shadow of the Erdtree as potential for the Game of the Year. So maybe that is why they did. Maybe that's the answer they came up with, was to do that.
Yeah. I could see it. Although I think that would be a very awkward category if Shadow of the Erdtree hadn't come out, and you were again not suggest that like Vessel of Hatred or The Final Shape don't deserve any recognition, would just be weird. Right. The other part of Game Awards ceremonies that's usually a little bit controversial is indie game categories, because no one has any idea what the fucking indie game is anymore. But the Golden Joysticks have again done their own little twist on it, because as well as acknowledging just the best indie game in general, which perhaps unsurprisingly was awarded to Balatro. They have also come up with a separate category, Best Indie Game Self-Published. Now, of course, the Game Awards, they went with the Best Debut Indie Game route, which seemed good on paper until you were reminded that games like Animal Well and Balatro, seemingly hot contenders, were both indie games and debut indie games, which meant like you could potentially have one game win both. That is less of a concern going the self-published route, and it creates, I think, a more specific confines for within that award to live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's not a bad workaround to go self-published, and then just have best indie. I think but at the same time, I'm like, I wish they'd just come up with a better definition for indie. Maybe there is like an amount of money, a size of team. Maybe you really do go that into the weeds with it.
Maybe, I don't know. I know we had this exact same debate last year at this exact same time, but like, I just don't think there's a neat solution.
You're right. There is no neat solution, because like, what are you going to do if you say, it has to be 15 or fewer to be an indie, and then a team's got 16 people, but is absolutely an indie? Then what are you going to do? Say,
yeah, but no, also like, what if one team of 15 earns on average, like, the average salary of that team is like $50,000, and another team of 15 people have an average salary of $500,000.
Right. Yeah.
Because they've all got 10 times as much experience. Then all of a sudden, team size is not irrelevant, but not as useful as for comparative reasons.
And then I want to say, well, what about doing it as monetary? Like, this is the amount of money this game costs to make. But then the problem is, what you're then going to have is big AAA developers would just start to make. They'd get little siloed off teams and give them a little bit of money and say, you're going to make a game. You've made a game for 20 grand. Well done. Yeah. And then but you actually find out, you made it for 20 grand, sure, but you used loads of your other departments and loads of assets and loads of other stuff that you had available that these other indies don't. So you can't even do it.
Or you made a sequel. Like you took, which, I'm not suggesting that making sequels is necessarily easier, but you might be able to save money by, I don't know, let's say you had to create an engine from scratch, and for the sequel you don't need to do that, or something like that.
Right.
It's a flawed. There's no perfect solution.
No, it is very tricky.
Yeah. Worth noting as well, curiously enough, the winner for Best Indie Game Self-Published was the Souls-like game Another Crab's Treasure, beating out, not necessarily that many heavy hitters, but it's worth noting that critically acclaimed and fan-favourite titles such as Tactical Breach Wizards and UFO 50 were both in there.
I can't believe Little Kitty Big City didn't win. That utter filth game.
Oh, utter filth. Little Kitty Big City. I'd forgotten about that. Great. Now I really want to play it. That's my pick.
I know someone who did. I was chatting to someone at work, and he said he played Little Kitty Big City.
Oh, I bet they did.
It was good.
Oh yeah. How little was the kitty?
I didn't ask. I should have inquired.
How big was the city?
I think
you don't have to answer that.
I think it was a big city.
I bet it was. I just, again, going on to other categories, I can't help but laugh because some of these, again, not to get too hung up on this, but they are a little bit rogue. In particular, again, I just want to call out the best gaming hardware category, which, again, like, maybe in another year, maybe in like a console launch year, which maybe this technically was for PlayStation, but I don't know, in 2020, you could have put in like the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 and stuff like that. Instead, amongst the nominees for best gaming hardware, we have such hits as the Asus ROG Zephyrus G14 and the Turtle Beach Stealth Ultra. And again, no part of this is me saying that like a pair of headphones or a really good I don't even know what some of this stuff is, because there's one thing here called the LG Ultra Gear 32 GS95U. Like,
that's got to be a monitor.
32-inch
monitor.
And like, I know what a backbone is, and I know what the RTX 4070 is, but it's just a little bit weird to me where, like, imagining, and again, this is fan voting, so it's not a jury or a panel sat behind the scenes somewhere. But if we do imagine it's that for a second, imagine if you were part of a jury trying to determine whether or not the 4070 Super was better than the Turtle Beach Stealth Ultra. You're comparing a graphics card to a pair of headphones. It's like, what are we really doing here, folks? And of course, the winner ends up being the Steam Deck OLED because the Steam Deck is an incredible piece of kit.
I think you're absolutely right. I think this is another category where they wanted to give the Steam Deck an award, and so they had to backfill it with some other contenders. And they were like,
maybe,
what the hell are we going to put in here? So
or they have some partners, and they really wanted to get some extra sponsorship money, and so they were like, hey, LG or Turtle Beach, like if you were nominated for an award, could you, if we scratch your back, and so on and so forth.
Interesting. So I can tell you the Asus ROG Zephyrus G14 is a laptop.
Right.
Backbone 1 is obviously a backbone. LG Ultra Gear is a monitor. And I didn't realise that Turtle Beach Stealth Ultra, I assumed it was headphones. It is not. It is a controller.
Oh, my bad. I've been talking about it like it's a pair of headphones.
Wait, Turtle Beach?
That's the first thing that pops into my head. Is it a nice looking controller? What kind of controller is it?
It looks a bit like an Xbox controller. It does look nice. Oh, it is an Xbox controller. So it's that's why it looks like an Xbox controller. It's like a special edition Xbox controller. Weird.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
with rapid charge dock.
I guess the weird thing is that I would say it's like their version of kind of like an enhanced controller with maybe swappable thumbsticks and trigger locking and back pads and all that kind of stuff. But then Xbox already have their own one of that. Xbox already make their Elite controller. So I guess maybe it's one of those things of the more the merrier. I know PlayStation have kind of done the same thing where they've got their own kind of big, fancy, expensive controller now, but they also have let other third-party companies do their own versions. There you go. The Turtle Beach Stealth Ultra nominated for best gaming hardware, not a winner.
This feels like the definition of Apple. You're comparing apples to oranges, doesn't it? Like how
it does, yeah.
It is bizarre. Best gaming hardware. And like, what are the metrics? How are you deciding? Like, it's so random.
Especially when something like a Steam Deck OLED is an end-to-end solution to something, whereas a 4070 Super is a means to an end. Like a 4070 Super gets you like a fifth of the way towards a very nice computer, whereas the Steam Deck OLED is like a great piece of handheld hardware. I don't know. It's very unusual.
Yeah, bizarre.
I do like one of the next categories I have here, best game trailer. I wish I was a little bit more familiar with some of the games that have actually been nominated. I might actually have to do some research after the pod and go and watch each of the 6 trailers that have been nominated. But I think it's a cool award, and I think game trailers are great, and I think the people that make them are usually even better. Helldivers
2. Caught that. Are you going to be nice about the Plucky Squire and say that they deserve to be in a category because they're in best game trailer?
Do you know what? I would have to rewatch that trailer.
Couldn't even give him that.
I didn't realize I'd been so nasty to them last week that it left a lasting impression on you.
You were mean. It didn't leave an impression on me. I think it left an impression on the makers behind Plucky Squire.
You know what? When you put it that way, if you told me the people who made the Plucky Squire listened to last week's episode of the podcast, I would be a little bit sad, and I'd reach out to them and be like, "No, come on!" Like, I meant everything I said. I stand by it, but it's nothing personal.
Hey, if they are watching, I liked the Plucky Squire, so send me free stuff about to do the Plucky. Don't send it to Jamie.
Send him a Plucky Squire mouse pad.
Yeah.
It's like a regular mouse pad, except it forces your mouse to move 20% slower than it should do. The winner, by the way, of the best game trailer, Helldivers 2, The Fight for Freedom Begins, which is the launch trailer for Helldivers 2. Again, I feel like I've seen lots of Helldivers 2 trailers over the years now. I can't remember specifically what the launch trailer was like, what this Fight for Freedom Begins trailer was like, but I do think that Helldivers 2 had a really cool promotional kind of run in the build-up to release, and some of their kind of their satirizing of many of the topics that would go on to continue to be satirized in the game itself, and some of that Starship Troopers-esque comedy
was great.
It was good fun. So I can see why that's in the mix. We get some of the usual fair best game adaptation performance categories, similar to the Game Awards. Should we break down though to the awards that were chosen by critics and creators?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. The 4 the four awards were the Streamer's Choice Awards, the Critics' Choice Awards, which kind of speaks for itself, the Breakthrough Award, and the Lifetime Award, which I'm realizing the Lifetime Award wasn't a part of the story that I copied and pasted. So I wonder if it's one of two things, Jonesy. Get this: they either haven't announced it yet, or I didn't copy and paste the final award of the Golden Joysticks.
I'm excited to find out which.
Which one do you think it is? Place your bets.
I'm going to bet that you didn't copy it.
I don't know if they've given it out yet.
They'd want to keep because the Lifetime Award could change between now and whenever they give it out. Like, surely that's one that's easy to sort out because it's a lifetime of stuff that you're deciding to reward.
Yeah, but it could actually be a thing where, like, you're not wrong. Where, like, again, I don't know how this all plays out, but yeah, maybe there is some element of it where, like, it's an in-person award. I'm pretty sure they haven't announced it yet.
So wait for the person to be available.
But then there was an actual ceremony that did take place. It was on the 21st, hosted by Ben Starr of Final Fantasy XVI fame. So weird.
Bit weird.
Maybe there wasn't. Maybe no one did anything good enough to get a Lifetime Award this year. They looked at everyone who's still alive and they were like, do you know what? No, none of you deserve this. And so instead, we're left with the Critics' Choice, the Streamer's Choice, and the Breakthrough Award. And I'll be honest, I'm kind of half surprised, half not surprised by some of these. The Breakthrough Award, perhaps understandably, Balatro. Again, the more of these awards shows that come and go, the more it becomes clear that that really was the kind of the indie game that took large parts of the industry by storm. Certainly, as far as critics go. Streamers' Choice Awards, Jonesy. I was curious to see how this might go, whether they would sort of vote for their favorite game of the year. But of course, you have to remember these are streamers. These are people who perpetually spend, their life effectively online, and whether or not something is interesting for their chat is the only metric they really care about for how good a video game is. So the Streamer's Choice Award actually went to Chained Together, a game that we've played on this very YouTube channel.
We have indeed. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yes. And weirdly enough, again, I don't know how this happens. The Critics' Choice Award, the winner of the award voted for exclusively by critics, ended up being a game that I don't think they even nominated in the Game Awards, and that's Helldivers 2. So there we were last week, sat there trying to decide between Metaphor, Final Fantasy, and Balatro, and here are some other set of critics from a parallel universe, apparently, that are way into Helldivers.
But we talked about Helldivers, and we did say how maybe because of when it came out earlier in the year, that if that success had happened later in the year, especially toward like the back end, that I can't imagine it wouldn't have been maybe in there, especially when it was hitting like 500,000 players on Steam. Like if that had happened a month and a half ago, do I really think that wouldn't have been in the category, or at least nominated for Game of the Year? Like of course it would have been. I think it's almost like a victim of its success, like we said earlier in the year, and now a lot of people have fallen off, and so maybe it's not as highly considered. I like they've done this. I like that the critics have put this in there. I like that they've gone back over the whole year and have said, no, do you know what? We had an absolute banger of a game, one of the most successful games. It's a Sony studio, isn't it?
I don't know if they bought them, but they published it. It's there, yeah.
So I wonder if probably the most successful Sony published game of the year, and to be like to just kind of forget it in that sense. I don't know. I'm grateful. I played a lot of it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was very good.
Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. I since we spoke last, there's another podcast that I listened to, and they, for reasons of when they could all get together and have a long, I think it was 5-hour plus chat, they ended up doing their Game of the Year podcast really early this year. And I think one of the three of them had, I think Helldivers 2 was her Game of the Year. And yeah, when it came down to kind of like building their top 10 list, which they all had to kind of agree on and argue over which game should go on top of which game and so on, she was kind of adamant that like, we can't sit here and pretend that Helldivers 2 didn't happen. And like, if you go back to February, it was PlayStation's fastest selling title of all time. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that, obviously it was day and date on PC, which gave them access to a humongous market that they have only really just started tapping into in their whole history as publishers. But yeah, we can't pretend that the Helldivers 2 phenomenon wasn't massive at the start of the year, and it wasn't like the game being taught. Like this was a year where I don't know if you have this with some of your gamer friends, but this was a year where like my kind of they're gonna hate that I call them part-time, but part-time gamery friends didn't come to me with many, oh, what's this game about? What's that game about? It was a year where like some of them bought Call of Duty, not all of them did. Some of them bought FIFA, not all of them did. Like one of them was looking forward to Assassin's Creed and was disappointed when I told them that it got delayed. All the the usual kind of stuff that you'd expect from a certain kind of gamer. Helldivers 2 was the game that like they asked me about. Was the game like, what's this game I'm seeing on TikTok? And it was the game that a bunch of us bought. I think we had some sessions with some of my crew because you know some of them already. Do you remember at the start of the year?
We did, yeah.
Like people that it wasn't just like you, me, Chris, and Steph, or like and then add in like maybe like Martin or something like that, depending on how wide it got. Like it actually penetrated an audience of people who wouldn't usually be in for that kind of thing, who don't buy games on a whim, and bought Helldivers 2 on a whim. So credit where it's due, I guess. Shout out to Arrowhead. And that, you know what? The more I talk about Helldivers 2 as we hurtle towards the end of the year, the more I'm like, man, now would be an okay time to check back in on Helldivers 2 and see how different it is. So, like, I haven't played since probably, March or April at this point.
Oh, I was thinking, as you were saying it, I was thinking exactly the same thing.
Maybe that's something we should do.
I think we should hop in.
Maybe that's a stream we can cook up for the folks at home. No, we can't promise anything though.
Friend of the show, Martin Ruffle in chat, said it penetrated me.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of like a funny penetration follow-up joke. I've got nothing. I hope it hurt.
There you go.
Jonesy, one thing you can't do at the moment, particularly effectively, is play Helldivers 2 on the go. You could, I guess, kind of do something like that if you owned a PlayStation Portal, for example, and you were in your living room and your PlayStation 5 was on in your other room. Ooh. You could sit in your living room and stream Helldivers 2 from your PlayStation 5 if you had a really strong... Basically, what I'm saying is it's doable. It's not particularly convenient. A bit like remote play. Sony have been telling us it's a thing for a long, long time. It has been a thing for a long, long time. You could have played PS4 games via your PlayStation Vita if you wanted to. The secret is none of us fucking did it. And I think Sony have slowly but surely acknowledged that fact, Jonesy. And that has manifested itself in two different ways in the past week. And I'll start off with the bigger headline of the two, and that is that Sony, allegedly, again, I think this is according to a Bloomberg report, are developing a PlayStation handheld console that is designed to compete with the Switch and the Xbox, which is to say they're making a platform that builds on the PlayStation Portal, but as opposed to playing games via streaming them from the console over the internet, it is an actual console that will run games natively and is aiming at competing with the Nintendo Switch and Nintendo's upcoming Switch successor. Obviously, Jonesy, we haven't seen something like this from the big S since the halcyon days of PSPs and Vitas. So how does that just initially strike you, the prospect of getting another PlayStation handheld that's not the Portal?
I've owned them. I've enjoyed them. I've always thought they're kind of crap.
Wow, okay.
And I think this is going to be more of the same. I don't think it's something I feel I need at this point, a PlayStation Portable.
Really? Okay.
Not like a PlayStation Portal, but an actual handheld PlayStation console. I just can't... Anything they do is going to be... I don't know, because like on one hand, if you said to me, oh yeah, but you're going to get PlayStation 5 quality games on the go, it's got an inbuilt storage, you plug it into your PlayStation 5, you can load games onto it, and happy days. I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds really cool. But then I'm like, but am I actually going to do it? Is it actually going to be that good? I don't know.
You've got a lot of leverage out of the Switch in your household. Why does it not theoretically function the same way?
Switch hasn't been played for quite a long time now.
Okay.
A few months it's been gathering dust.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same for me for any kind of handheld, which is partially due to the fact that I just don't travel as much as I used to, so I don't need to fill that space. I tell you what, though, I will say if I had a handheld PlayStation, I probably would play it at home purely if I could play games that I'm currently playing, purely because I could play it when the kids have already taken over the PlayStation 5, and then I could go and play something else.
Yes.
And I would rather do that on PlayStation games than I would on Nintendo games. But I don't think that the format of a handheld is how I want to play most of those things.
Yeah, I get that. I think potentially, though, the market seems to be saying increasingly that they do kind of want that.
Yeah, no, you're right.
You obviously had the success of the Switch.
Yep.
Then you've had the in tandem with that, the success of the Steam Deck.
Yep, Steam Deck's done very well.
Yeah. It also seems like there have been room for other third parties to make Steam Deck-like machines and also have a certain degree of success. And now, it's just last week that we were talking about Phil Spencer alluding to the potential for Xbox to make a handheld, and now we get this report from Bloomberg about PlayStation. It does seem like there is a growing awareness that perhaps the market for handheld consoles never really went away. It just wasn't perhaps being serviced in quite the way it could. Nintendo knew that all along, because whilst consoles like the Vita were flopping and Sony were pulling out of that race, platforms like the 3DS were continuing to sell like hotcakes. So this isn't news to Nintendo. The thing that I'd potentially be worried about when it comes to a PlayStation-specific handheld, and I don't know if you think these concerns are unfounded or not, is that with Nintendo, the Switch was their primary console because it was a hybrid, and you knew that all of their focus was going to go onto that console, and so all of the fruits of their labor when it comes to their first-party software were going to land on the Switch, and you'd have a console that would be relatively well served and well supported software-wise for its lifespan, and that ended up being the case. And then when you look to Steam Deck, and you look to the ROG Ally and things like that, you're talking about things that run either Windows or Steam OS or something like that, and give people a fair amount of flexibility with what they can install and what they can sideload and so on and so forth. So you end up having access to whether it's your whole Steam library or any of the other PC launchers you have and things like that. If PlayStation create a new handheld and it's a closed-off system, i.e. the only games you're playing are the games that you own on whatever this PlayStation handheld is, unless they find some kind of way to make PlayStation 5 games immediately compatible with this handheld by creating some crazy down-resing, down-sampling tech that just makes them run, which it just doesn't sound like a thing. Do we then get into the PSP and Vita era of I don't know, a game like Astrobot comes out and you're getting Astrobot insert word here for the handheld console, and you're having to buy that as well, and it's and that's what I don't want. Do you have a handheld that only plays 4 things, whereas a Steam Deck, any one person can buy a Steam Deck now and probably have 200 games to play because we've all got Steam libraries.
That's the thing. That's what I don't want, and that's what I think. You're right. I think that's what PlayStation Portable sort of systems have always sought to be. That's why I think the PlayStation Portal, whilst sounding like it's a crap idea, I kind of like the idea. It's like, no, you can play PlayStation 5 games on the go wherever you are, and this is how we've managed to do it. I think, and it looks good. It just doesn't. It's not very practical. When it comes to things like a portable handheld PlayStation, I just these days, and I know, like you said, they're really popular these days. So my opinion is probably kind of irrelevant. I just still don't understand the idea of it when nearly everyone, is carrying around a £1,500 piece of kit in their pocket anyway, in the shape of a mobile phone. And if you just had a better integration. Not remote, like we've said, remote isn't good enough. But if you had something else that meant that you could play PlayStation 5, especially games, somehow through your iPhone, that would be so. And with a back, you'd need something. Maybe you need a mount. And I know they've done it before, and I know people have tried this. But that's the thing.
These things exist, and no one's buying them. You can remote play your PS5 on your phone. No one does it.
No. So what I'm saying, I don't think the answer is playing remote. I think the answer is having it there available to you, but I don't think that's a disc. So then what am I saying? It's basically a backbone with an emulator built in, but it feels and looks like a PlayStation controller that you mount your iPhone to. And again, I think it sounds chonky and rubbish even in my imagination. But I feel like there's got to be some way to do that without you going, well, I've got my phone in my pocket, and I've got my Steam Deck in my other pocket, and I've got it just seems, I don't know, that just seems clunky and difficult. I like the idea of sort of streamlining this whole thing, but
sure. But then I don't know. I'm all for streamlining, but I don't mind carrying around a second thing. Like, I don't mind having my phone in my pocket and something else in my backpack. It's been fine for me with the Switch. It's been fine for me with the Steam Deck. I guess it's just difficult because handhelds are one of those consoles, perhaps even or one of those things rather, perhaps even more so than home consoles, where like, how many people are going to own multiple of these things? And like, I don't know, like if you were going on a trip, like if you had a plane to catch, I found, for example, that once I got my Steam Deck, the only reason I had to go back to my Switch was every time a new exclusive piece of software came out.
Right.
So last year that was Tears of the Kingdom and Super Mario Wonder, and this year, for me, that has been nothing, because I'm not playing Super Mario Party Jamboree or the Princess Peach thing or whatever.
Do you play your Steam Deck?
Yeah, semi-regularly. But then the Steam Deck's the opposite problem, where like, with the Switch, you get a thing of like, oh, Nintendo have released a new critically acclaimed game, I'm going to go and play that. It kind of doesn't really happen like that on the Steam Deck.
No.
With the Steam Deck, it's like, oh, I'm going to be on the train for 6 hours on Saturday. Maybe now is the right time to replay Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. On the train. That's
what I don't like about the idea with the Steam Deck. Like, I've got so many games in my Steam library that I'm not about to sit down and play on my PC. But when if I had a Steam Deck, I think I would say, oh, yeah, let me give that a try. But I'm not. Let's be honest, I'm not picking up Space Marine 2 and going, do you know what? I could play this on my PC, but I don't want to. I'm going to play this on my Steam Deck. Like, it's not going to happen. I feel like any new game that I want to play on PC sort of format or on Steam,
unless they're indie games,
maybe.
Like again, like Balatro plays great on a Steam Deck, and like if I went back to the indie game section, and I was like, I would happily play Animal Well on a Steam Deck. I'd happily play Lorelei on a Steam Deck. I'd probably rather play the Plucky Squire on the Steam Deck than on the play, because sometimes sitting in front of like a 60-inch TV with a PS5 on and playing the Plucky Squire feels a bit dumb compared to like sitting on a couch with a TV on in the background and playing the Plucky Squire on the Steam Deck. Like, I don't know.
I know this is what we need. We already know what we need, and I think Meta are the closest to it. We need a pair of glasses.
Okay, here we go.
No screen. We just need a pair of glasses that projects the screen into your world for just you, obviously, and then you just have a controller, and the games are all in the controller.
Okay, yeah,
that's exactly what we need. Get rid of this bullshit about looking at a little monitor in front of you and holding, like, because that's the thing. No one likes looking at their hands or between their hands while they're playing.
I do.
No, you don't. No, you're just making it up.
Yes, I do.
No, you don't.
No, I'm not. The only time I don't is when I want to lie flat on my back and I feel weird about holding my Steam Deck or my Switch above my face, and I might drop it on my nose.
Because then when you start, like what you do with your phone, when you start to fall asleep, you drop it on your own face,
you drop
and it hits you in the nose, and
that's not good for anyone.
No one's and then you've got to explain to your wife why you've dropped your phone on your face. And then she's like, what are you doing at 3 a.m. looking at your phone anyway? It'd be worse with the Steam Deck.
And you just go, what do you think? And then roll over. That's what I do.
How about this? How about Sony, instead of making a PlayStation like handheld console, they make a handheld console which is also a smartphone, so you can get rid of your smartphone altogether. You have just the PlayStation.
There are some boardrooms I'd love to see you in, and there are some boardrooms I'm glad you will never step foot in.
But they did it. Do you remember they did it? Wasn't it they did the Sony Ericsson little game phone where you could slide the back down and it had 2 little joysticks.
I remember the Nokia N-Gage. That was the phone I remember as like the most outright attempt to create a mobile phone handheld console hybrid. I owned a Nokia N-Gage. It was actually my first ever phone was a Nokia N-Gage, and then weirdly enough, I moved on to Sony Ericsson's. But
what was it even?
I never.
There
was a phone called the Sidekick.
I think it's the Xperia. I think it looks like it was called the Xperia. Yeah, Sony Ericsson Xperia Play. I really wanted one. Like, I saw it and I was like, "This is the future." So it had the screen slid up and a little D-pad and button thing slid out the back.
Oh yeah, it kind of looks like the PSP in a weird way, where it's primarily a D-pad and then 4 face buttons. They're actually the same symbols in the same positions as PlayStation's.
Oh, woof! The Nokia N-Gage is ugly. I forgot how ugly that was.
That was a really, like, grand scheme of things, a really early attempt at that kind of tech, and that was cartridge based. You would go out and buy physical games off store shelves and put cartridges in. Clearly, I loved the N-Gage because they clearly designed it all and had this very elaborate front with effectively a D-pad, not a very good one, and then a number pad on the other side that effectively became your face buttons. And then someone was like, "Hang on a second, how are you going to use it as a phone? Like, how are you going to talk to people?" And they ended up putting the speaker and the speaker and the mic on the side of the phone. So to make a phone call, you would hold the N-Gage, the flat top almost of the N-Gage flat against your face. So it's like the phone itself was out facing the wall, exactly the way you're doing right now. Like imagine if you were holding a taco, it'd be like holding the back of the taco against your.
That's horrible.
Face. Yeah, and that's why the expression side talking came from, because you had to talk to people through the side of your phone.
I'm just looking at pictures of something that I had that I absolutely loved, and as I thought in my memory, I'm right. It's the Sega Game Gear, which I owned, and it looks exactly the same as the Steam Deck. So it's nice to see that style and form factor hasn't changed one bit.
Hang on a second, it's got a D-pad and 2 face buttons.
Exactly the same.
The Steam Deck,
the same.
Okay, now I know you're being silly. One last thing, Jonesy, on the here and now rather than the future. We were a little bit surprised, actually, especially given some of the conversations we had last week, where immediately after we wrapped up the previous episode of the podcast, a piece of news dropped about the PlayStation Portal, the existing PlayStation handheld console that's already in the market. Exactly that. They dropped the fact that the PlayStation Portal would be introducing a cloud streaming beta, meaning that previously, for anyone that didn't know, the only way you could play games on your Portal was streaming them from your PS5. You had to own a PS5, it had to be on, and you would be streaming games from it to this Portal. Now you can play games over the cloud using access to over 120 titles from the PlayStation Plus game catalog. So that means games like Ghost of Tsushima, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and many, many more are accessible on the PS Portal via cloud streaming up to 1080p 60 FPS. I think there is a 720p mode as well if you need to perhaps reduce bandwidth consumption for a little bit to get a bit more of a stable connection. And of course, this all taps into some of the Portal features that were there to begin with, like haptic feedback and adaptive triggers, a touchpad, speakers, motion sensor, all that kind of stuff, which, interestingly, it's one of the first times we've really been able to say this about a handheld, a case where, a software update, a firmware update, has radically changed what you're actually getting from a console that some people out there will have already owned for a year. Overnight, this has become a far more interesting, far more capable console. And I think that's a really interesting prospect, because how often we'd never be able to say that before, where, oh shit, my console got updated last night and it has this whole new arm to what it can do.
Yes, and let me say something embarrassing. I've wanted a PlayStation Portal for a little while.
Okay, I don't think that's too embarrassing.
Thank you. Not enough to buy one, but at the same time, I think I like the way it looks. I like the form factor. I know it's not. It sounds like a pain in the ass to use. So your PlayStation has to be turned on and connected to Wi-Fi, and then if you're connected to Wi-Fi somewhere else, then you can play your games. That sounds horrendous. It sounds like a pain in the ass.
Sure.
Especially for a disc boy like me. Like, what am I going to do? Call my neighbor to go to my house to put a new disc in my place? Like, it's not going to happen. So then I'm limited to games that I've got installed and blah, 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 whatever. But now, and I think we talked about this when they announced the PlayStation Portal, to turn around and say, oh no, we're going to bring our streaming service to the PlayStation Portal. Suddenly, your PlayStation Plus membership opens up a whole world of games to you anywhere you want, and it solves so many of the problems that we've just been talking about. You haven't got the issue that you're playing a neutered version of a PlayStation game because you've got it on a portable PlayStation console. You haven't got the problem that you've got with a lot of the other consoles when it comes to like the graphics and stuff. It should look crisp. It should run well. It might be a bit laggy. I'm sure that's why they're running betas to try and test how that's going to actually function, which was something that we kind of speculated would be a problem with the PlayStation Portal anyway. Although some people say it wasn't bad.
Yeah, it actually seems like in fact the fact that some people are reporting that there's a little bit of a slightly more noticeable input latency with the cloud streaming beta actually goes to suggest that the PlayStation Portal's core and original functionality was actually pretty rock solid to begin with.
Yeah. I played the whole of what is it called? BioShock Infinite on PlayStation streaming. So right. I know that can can be solid. Obviously it wasn't, a up-to-date modern game running, so maybe that's why it was a little bit better. But I've played other games streaming as well. Like my kids have played games streaming or streaming. So if they can get it to function in a similar way to it functions on your PlayStation, and I don't see why they couldn't. Suddenly like you've got a big category of games that you can jump on and you can play and you can stream.
And you saying that just made me realize, and tell me if I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but the PlayStation Portal retails for I think about £200 here in the UK.
Yeah.
And we talked earlier about how there are Sony first party exclusives in the catalog. We talked about like Ghost of Tsushima and Spider-Man Miles Morales and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart and stuff like that. Does a PlayStation Portal with an account and a subsequent subscription to the PlayStation Plus game catalog now become the cheapest way for some people who have no access to PlayStation titles to play PlayStation games? Some PlayStation games.
It probably does.
Because like with £200 in a subscription, you'd be playing... Now, admittedly, when you're talking about Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart and like Ghost of Tsushima, you're talking about games that are on PC now as well, so they're not tied solely to PS5s in the way they used to be. But yeah, I wonder if that becomes like the cheapest way to play some of those games, technically.
Yeah, and no, I think you may well be right, and like we said, you're not even playing like a switched version of a game where it's had to be dropped. The resolution stuff's had to be dropped down. You're playing good versions of these games, and if it is only £199 to get the, I don't know what the top tier of PlayStation Plus is. If you want to get like everything that could be available to you for cloud streaming and everything, but I think it's probably going to be a pretty good deal. And I can't think of anything else out there at the moment which I'm trying to think. Like obviously Xbox have their cloud streaming stuff as well, and you have access to some of that, but they don't do. There's no. I'm trying to think. Is there a device that allows you to do the cloud streaming?
They haven't made their own device, but you can do it on anything.
But you can do it on a
TV. You can do it on your phone.
Yeah, but which is the whole. This is an Xbox. This is an Xbox. This is an Xbox.
Like I did it once. This is many years ago now, but I played some of the Halo Master Chief Collection just on my phone back when that. But it was because at the time they couldn't get an app on the App Store because of the rules of Apple's weird rules around having stores within stores.
Yeah.
And now they want a cut of everything, but they were doing some weird like backwards way of thinking it where you could like. There was some makeshift way that you could get an icon on your home screen that technically was opened a browser window, but like and so like you can do that on, like you said, anything. Like as you correctly pointed out with the marketing campaign.
But if we're talking about like the barrier to entry thing, there's no like device that you can go and get for sub £200 which is going to do like I'm just trying to think like you can use a phone like you can,
yeah,
but that's
exactly,
going to
yeah.
you have to already have the phone, or you can get you can do it on a you can just do it on a TV, can't you?
Yeah, but then you need again like that's the weird thing about like the gaming market nowadays. Like how many people know with something like Indiana Jones coming out next month?
Yeah.
Like how many people know that they are an Xbox controller and a subscription away from streaming that game? Like no, like with no asterisk. It's exactly what I said about like when we were talking about the PlayStation Portal, and I mentioned like remote play on mobile. Like, how many people don't know they can already do this, and how many people just don't want to? I'm fascinated by it.
I think that's the difference. That's why I'm trying to think of like a device, because I think the difference is with the PlayStation Portal, it's you pay the money, you've got the device, it's ready to go. I think that's the thing. If you've got to get a control, this is the thing. If you've got to turn your phone on, and it sounds silly, if I've got to open the remote play app on my phone and get a controller and sync them up and blah blah blah, immediately I'm like, oh, I can't bother. It sounds dumb, but I feel that way. I know that I can do all of that. I've done it maybe one time because I'm like, I can't be bothered. I need to find it. I need to hook a controller to my phone. I can't be bothered. I need to do. How do I do that?
Weirdly enough, the last time I did remote play stuff on PlayStation was when we played Helldivers, because I have Helldivers on PC and most of you guys had it on PlayStation, and it had remote play, but we wanted to chat in a PlayStation party. Rather, because Discord's integration wasn't quite there yet at the time. This was at the start of the year. And so what I would do is I'd play, I'd sit on my PC, play Helldivers 2 with you guys, just through crossplay, and I'd open up a browser window and remote play my PS5, which is on in my bedroom, and just join a party through Chrome and sit there and chat to you guys.
Right.
Is that how many people know you can do that?
I feel like there are so many ways to do all of this stuff, but at the end of the day, it's like the ease of doing. How long does it take to go from sat on a chair to I'm going to do this, and you're doing it? I think maybe that's the difference.
Yes,
and the forethought. Like for example, if you've got a portable gaming device in your bag, that's what it's there for. You pull it out, you play games. If you've got your phone on you and you think, oh, I think I want to play a game, the chances you have a controller on you and non-existent, and then you're like, well, do I want to use on-screen controls? No, they're bloody terrible. Like, of course I don't.
Unless you buy a backbone, which is significantly cheaper than a Portal.
Which that makes all the sense in the world. Buying a backbone is like, yeah, that of course that's the way you should go, but at the same time, it's like, how many people are going to go out and actually buy a backbone? I nearly bought one the other day. I saw one for sale and I was like, oh, I really want a backbone. I should buy it. Is today the day I buy a backbone? I don't think it is. Maybe I'll get one soon. But I haven't done it yet. And then I've considered getting a PlayStation Portal, which makes no sense.
I know I'm probably asking a lot of you right now, but I really hope you get a Portal by the end of this podcast, because I just want to pick your brain about it.
By the end of this podcast?
No, by the end of the Super Show, not this episode.
I won't. I can tell you that right now.
Okay,
I'm not dropping 200 quid in the next couple of weeks on a Portal. No, I won't. Maybe I'll ask for one for Christmas. Maybe I'll ask for one for Christmas.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah, that's the spirit. Any closing thoughts on gaming handhelds before we get out of here?
I think you've kind of won me around a bit. Maybe I should be a little bit more excited about gaming handhelds in general. I think it's not in a bad place. I'm just looking now at the couple of backbones available, like 90 quid. It looks like you can get a backbone, but ugly.
More than I thought it was going to be.
Ugly. Half the price of a Portal and ugly.
Not two pretty bad selling points there, pack to pack.
And do you know what's weird? I'm looking at it. It's not even. Oh no, you can get one for £70 right now. I could go and get one. I could click and collect.
I was going to say 90 sounds like a lot for a controller with a bit of plastic in the back.
Well, this is £100, but it's on sale, which is why it's only 70.
What? I can see one for 70 new from Argos. I can see a refurbished one at Computer Exchange for 30.
But this is the thing. I look at that, ugly. I look at the PlayStation Portal that has its own built-in screen, and I'm like, oh, nice. And I'm not going to drain my battery on my phone as well, which is a benefit.
Nice.
And then maybe that's going to be the thing to have in the next year when everyone realizes that now you can stream games and it's amazing. and they're going to be sold out, and you're not going to be able to buy them.
Maybe. I do think there is an educational element, without sounding sort of like, like I don't know, elitist or whatever. But I do think there is like an educational element to where streaming is at, and the things that people could be streaming right now, and how close they are to being able to stream stuff like that.
I want to.
Part of it is educational or informing people, and but I still think the bigger battle in the long term is convincing them that it's actually worth their time and that it can be convenient. That's still the real uphill battle, and that it's as good an experience, which it's not yet.
I tell you something I want to try before the next pod, and I can come back and give you a review. Is sure. And I've not tried it. You can play Xbox games streamed onto the MetaQuest 3 using the MetaQuest 3 as your screen, and then just using a controller. And I've not tried that, but I would love to try that, because if that is that, I think would be something that I would use all the time, that I've not even tried. Mostly because I don't think I have the right level of Xbox Game Pass to let me do it, but I might have to spend a couple extra quid.
Do they put the streaming stuff behind Ultimate now? Is that the way they do it?
I'm not sure. I will need to look into it. Okay. Oh yeah, I'll have a look.
You can play some Stalker 2 on your Quest 3.
Ooh, there you go. I'll be terrified, but I can do it. I can do it, and I bet it looks amazing. I was telling Chris and Jamie, because we met up in person. It was great, and you guys had a little play on the MetaQuest 3, and when you went, I was playing on. I was looking at some video stuff for a bit, and I was like, this is so damn good. Like the video side of it, watching Netflix and stuff. I'll have to get next time.
I actually looked up the price of the Quest 3 after I left.
Did you?
Because the PSVR 2 is once again on a very heavy discount. But it's like one of those things where if I could get either one of them, I'd definitely rather get the Quest 3.
Right.
Because it has the far better software library, and it's probably overall better as a PC headset as well. But it's more expensive. And I think it is on sale at the moment. I think there is some kind of a Black Friday sale, but I don't know when it's going to last, or how long it's going to last until. And even on sale, it's still a little chunk more than the PSVR 2 is on its deep discount. I think £200 off is the PSVR 2.
Right.
So something to think about. But yeah, I did come away from that thinking, man, maybe the Quest 3 is the headset that makes sense for me after all these years. Because it's got a lot to offer, no matter what your use case is.
Oh, it definitely has, and I think, like I said, the quality of watching like Netflix and stuff on it is phenomenal. Like I absolutely love it. I think it looks great. Yeah. I don't ever watch it and think, it looks a bit fuzzy, or it looks a bit. No, it just looks wicked. And I love having the massive screen and being able to decide on distances and stuff. I need to also. I don't know what controllers you can use on it. Can you just hook up a DualSense controller to it? I don't know. I'll have to try and find out.
Or what? Sorry, to the Quest.
To the Quest 3, yeah.
I've got no idea. That's a you question, I'm afraid.
I will look into that, and I'll look into Xbox, and next week I'll give you the lowdown. But there we go.
There you go. As if you needed any more reasons to tune into next week's episode, we now have Jonesy's Adventures in Virtual Reality to look forward to as well. So remember to come back and tune in, same place, same time next week, for more gaming goodness and for the penultimate episode of the Super Show for now. But with that, Jonesy, I say thank you very much for joining me this week and for sharing your expertise and your knowledge.
Thank you, mate. Thank you so much for hosting. Thank you, everybody, for chatting along with us. I can see you all here as you've been chatting away.
Shout out to everyone watching live and chatting. And with that, we say